Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the Conversation of Our Generation. My name is Nick Jamel, and I'm just here trying to get the dialogue going, trying to talk about things that I find are important as far as philosophy, as far as politics, music, art, anything that really comes to mind, movies, stuff like that, that just kind of can get a dialogue going about something that's a deeper, more essential truth, and that can get us closer to where I think you know where I think we are headed as far as like a society, and trying to get us to discuss and try to get different points of view and a dialogue going that really helps us get to the heart of the issues and really solve problems. Because I say it all the time here, it's you can't get one solution from one person. It takes a lot of people. It took however many people to build our Constitution. A lot of delegates. And it took them a long time to hash that out, and doing it all day long, every day. And it takes. That's why we have brain or think tanks and brain trusts, and why people, rulers have advisors. No one person has all the solutions, and so that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. Is we need to be people coming together in the common ground to think of solutions. Because the all of us together, if you get a million people together hashing out these ideas and really getting in on it, really diving deep, that's when we come up with really good solutions. So that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm hoping to get going, is an exchange, get people commenting and bringing up questions that I didn't cover on an idea, getting people to add on or get their point, throw in their 2 cents. If you see these videos on Facebook, throw something in there, that says, hey, this is kind of what I think about it. Or, if you like what I'm saying and you think I put words in your mouth basically for what you think, or if you think it's just interesting what I have to say, share it, and let's get people involved, and get people into this, because I want to see people really not afraid to discuss about anything, because our discussions and our thoughts are the things that make us, it's what makes us human, is the fact that we can talk about these things and solve these issues. Otherwise, if we're just sitting here relying on instinct, we're no different than any other animal. But here we have the ability to communicate these things and to write these things down and to pass this stuff on. That's a deeper knowledge and a deeper understanding of this cosmos. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is I don't think I'm saying it right, but cosmogony. And so this is, I'm going to define it real fast. So, oops. I'm going to define it real fast. I have a definition that just pops up on Google when you type it in, but I think it suffices, and I'll tell you kind of where I'm coming from on this afterwards. I think it's a cosmogony, or it says or cosmogony, is an example, or is any model concerning the coming into existence or origin of either the cosmos, or the so-called reality of sentient beings. So people who are beings that can think and feel. Developing a complete theoretical model has implications in both the philosophy of science and epistemology. So this, I think, is huge. And it's a huge thing for us to understand, that it's still being improved upon today. But I'm going to talk about the Greek philosophers. And so I've been going through a book on the pre-Socratic thinkers and the people who really built the Greek understanding of the cosmos. And I'm about halfway through it, but it'll have like a chapter, and they're 8 to 10 pages on kind of like what their arguments are and how they kind of fit in and who they build off of and how. And so that's kind of what it is. And then it has a few more pages at the end of each chapter that they were referencing throughout that are, actually their writings. So you can say, he'll say, hey, they're arguing for this, and you go look over there, boom, 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 and you see what it is that they wrote, actually, that they're basically arguing for. And so that's, I think, pretty interesting in and of itself. But I think it's really incredible to see how they understood the universe, and and the similarities and the the differences that we have with them now. I mean, they do have like a lot of similar beliefs as far as like an the understanding of like an omniscient being or something like that, like a kind of almost what they didn't ever call it, what the Judeo-Christian tradition called it, but I think a lot of the sentiment that we used to, and a lot of the ways that we express how, in Christianity and in Judaism, how we express what God is, I really think, a lot of the wording and a lot of the, rationale does come from Greek thought. Their way to analyze it is very similar. Um, so that's one really interesting thing, but they have a lot of, they have to build the universe up based on, you know, like 5, 6, 700 BC, you know, uh, um, technology. So, they talk about people like Pythagoras and how he believed everything boiled down to numbers. And that was his understanding of the universe. And I think, if you look at the way spirals work and the way a lot of cool, like, there is a lot of order in numbers. You can look at flowers and, see how, like, there's math that like goes into like tracking where the next pedal comes up and things like that. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but there's things like that. There's obviously the Pythagorean theorem, the Pythagorean triangle with the right triangle. They say that that's not necessarily his discovery, probably. I think they said that, from what I understand, even Egypt knew about it, and they preceded the Greek. The peak of like Greek civilization and when Pythagoras was around, but he was intrigued by that. He did a lot with squares and cubes of numbers, and so I think that's kind of where his idea came from personally, is like that numbers can build on themselves and build into bigger numbers, and so can the universe. It kind of builds on itself and builds bigger and bigger. It's really interesting because they have a lot of debate on whether or not the universe is infinite or finite, and what exists beyond a finite universe, right? So if there's a finite universe, then what else is all that other space that's out there? And so they have those kinds of debates. I forget who it was who said it, but there's one who basically believed that there's the Earth and like our solar system kind of, and then that there was like a shell around it basically, and there was holes in the shell, and beyond the shell was like a fiery heat, and that's where you could get the sun. So like there's holes in it that were the stars and the sun and the moon, and and I think the cool thing that you can get from that is, yes, obviously we know that's not true, that's not how it works, but if you're looking up at the sky all the time and you don't have a telescope, that makes sense. I mean, it's not like a terribly crazy idea. I mean, I know it's false, but it's not like for that time that it would be crazy. And the other thing is, it didn't impede their ability to track the movement of the stars and use the stars for navigation. And so, like, the cosmogony does not have to interfere with science. It frames your scientific thought a lot of times. And I think it helps you build your paradigm. But at the same time, if it's flexible and you understand that this may not be true, it's what you think is right based on the evidence that you have, when new evidence comes that disproves your paradigm and you have to move into the next one, as long as you're flexible enough to do that, I think that's good. And I think that's what you see in the Greek philosophers a lot, is the ability to say, well, that doesn't make sense, and then the next generation kind of takes what their thoughts were and they build on it, or they tweak it, or they move it, or sometimes they just are like, boom, gone. That guy was an idiot, but so that's one of the really interesting things that I see, and I think that it's still relevant in today because while we laugh at people, or we like scoff at the idea that people ever thought the world was flat, it's like, well, you're not falling off of it. What else do you think? Like, it's, if you can't see Earth from outside, it makes a lot of sense if you that and then even then, the people who believed that the Earth was round up until, I mean, you could really prove it, I mean, until math could like prove the curvature and all that. Well, they were just saying, the way the things move around us, You know, that's what I think that was Galileo and Copernicus' argument. I think it was definitely Copernicus, was that the way things move around us, we can't be flat, we have to be spherical because of how the stars track. You know, he was doing math and figuring that out. But, you know, I mean, it's pretty tough to prove that in that point in time. And I think too, he was able to see some other bodies. Probably, I think Galileo was definitely able to see some other planetary bodies and see that they were round, which helps, you know, your argument and say, well, they're round. Why would we be flat? You know, and so I think that's kind of where. And then once you could figure out the math about gravity, it's still a theory, you know, in the time, but you know, you could kind of build these things up and say, okay, now that we think that the Earth is round, how does this math work differently, you know? And eventually we had to, based on the fact that we believe the Earth was round, we were able to shoot a rocket into the air and it broke through our atmosphere, but we had to account for the curvature of the Earth and the way gravity works. And all those things built into that paradigm that we use to understand that. You know, that was 300, 400, 500 years of thought that went into sending stuff into space, you know, putting people on the moon and letting them have enough fuel to come back home. That's incredible. And, you know, but that's not possible without building a new paradigm and working within this paradigm. But what's possible when, you know, we don't just understand how gravity on our Earth works, but how gravity interacts with, you know, the idea of like theory of relativity. So that, you know, Einstein says basically, if you're trying to picture it, if you have like a big sheet, you know, like how you used to play the game where you put the ball in the sheet in gym class and you pull, everyone would pull and it would pop up in the air, right? Picture that. So you have a ping pong ball on one place, and you have a baseball somewhere else, and you have a basketball, and maybe, you know, so they're different sizes. Well, each one's going to warp that. So if you picture the sheet as time and space, like a time-space continuum, and you put different size objects in it, they warp it differently. So once we can get to the real understanding of that and what that means for us and build on that science, who knows what kind of different things we can do. You know, like in Star Wars, you see people, you know, going into light speed, and basically what they're doing is they're warping through it because they're able to bend, you know, themselves into into those pockets or whatever. I don't, you know, but if you can get you know, it sounds crazy now, but you know, 500 years ago, I'm pretty sure it sounded crazy that this is round, and we're gonna have to account for the fact that it's round to send a rocket full of jet fuel that's going to be withstanding some of the hottest temperatures you can face on planet Earth, going in and out. Sounds pretty freaking crazy. But now we're like, oh yeah, we've done it like 50 times. What's the big deal, man? You know. So that's one thing. And I think the other thing too is you can still build a logical case based on false assumptions. And I think that's something that we see today that we mistake is like, we don't get to the root of an argument a lot of times, where when we hear politicians going back and forth about whatever it is, whether it's terrorism or whether it's gay rights or trans rights or all these things, it's like they just talk about like the surface level. That's all they ever get to. And I think that there's so many things that we believe politically that are built on false assumptions. You know, that if you get down to the assumption, you're like, well, this whole argument makes sense, but that assumption's not right. You know, and I think that's where we have to really dive in, is what are the assumptions that we're making, and do our assumptions that we build our entire case off of make sense? You know, so if I build a case that, you know, if I say that, you know, if I have $1 billion and, you know, and then I go off of that, you know, this is all the things that I'm going to do. Well, I don't have $1 billion. So all that other stuff doesn't matter because there's no $1 billion. So I can't do any of that stuff. So that's kind of the case that I want us to look at, is where does this line of thought originate? Because until you get to that point, you can't really analyze it. And so, and that's true in science. That's true with, you know, the global warming argument. That's true with all these things. You know, these really, you know, a lot of our sciences are really young. Like economics is 400 years old. Modern medicine, like really what it is probably, I mean, like pharmaceutics and all these things are about 100 years old, really. I mean, you know, we've always had witch doctors and, you know, the medicine man and all these kinds of things, but like modern, like Eli Lilly and all those kinds of things, you know, those are only 100 years old. You know, flight is 100 something years, like 105, 110 years old. So I think that we have a long way to go with it, and that, you know, we should be proud of what we've done. You know, agriculture is a, you know, I don't even know. It's thousands and thousands of years old. I mean, it predates Egypt and predates the Bible by a long shot, and we still haven't mastered that. You know, there's still people in Africa who, I mean, sadly, you know, starve to death because of droughts, you know, and that causes famine. I mean, granted, the number of drought-related deaths has gone down tremendously. It's like 99% down in, you know, the last, it's like something crazy, like 20, 30 years. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's gotten a lot better. And it might be a little bit off on that statistic, but it's an insane drop, regardless. I just heard it recently, and I didn't forget exactly, or I forgot exactly what the numbers were, but it's crazy. And so why you know, why do we believe that we can master something if we've been doing one thing for thousands and thousands of years and haven't gotten there? I guess is my point. So that's what I think we need to look at is, you know, building on ourselves. And every time we create these paradigms of an understanding of the universe and an understanding of what it means to be human, we need to really analyze the roots of them, because I think right now we're in a dangerous understanding of our world around us. And I think that the fact that we just consider ourselves a bunch of cells, you know, I mean, sure, like science proves that we are a bunch of cells, but I think when you lose that there's something more to what it means to be human, you know, you lose our advantage on conquering this world. And I think that comes to my other big point is your cosmogony has to be useful, I think. And so the pessimistic ones, the materialists, like, you know, these materialists sort of like secular, you shouldn't have to suffer, you should just feel good all the time sort of like frameworks, because, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, those kinds of things are so, number one, I think it's antithetical to what the universe is trying to tell us. I think it's completely false. Number two, I think it's not even useful because everything that we've built has been built out of the understanding that if I suffer and I work for something now, I have something better later, right? If you understand anything about economics and itself, that's true. You know, production drives an economy, because if I own my labor and I own the fruits of my labor and I go out and do things and I add value, then my value that I add helps someone else, you know, add value somewhere else, and blah, 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 and to keep growing and growing and growing. And all of a sudden, you know, we have jobs in 10 years that no one even would have dreamed would exist, because everybody building off of everyone else's productivity. And so, and it's because, you know, that's how it works. And so when we say that things are kind of, I don't know, like almost like that there's like a meaninglessness and that there's a chaos, I think you discount the order of the universe. And I think that cosmogony says that there is an order, and each time we get a better understanding of the order, we improve that. But to say that the universe is chaos says that we can't help anything that happens to us. And once you say that, you're in, you know, Henry Ford's territory. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. You know, and I tell my staff this all the time when they're, you know, working on something, like, you know, or my brothers or people, I tell them all the time, like, that's the biggest thing to me is it starts with your mentality. And so if you have a cosmogony that says, look, there's order, and sure, it's going to smack you across the face. I mean, it's going to beat the hell out of you time to time. But if you know how to mitigate those times and to make sure that you don't get smacked around too much, and then at the times where it's good, you know how to really build something in those times and really take advantage of that, now we can make progress. And I think, to me, that's the most important part of an understanding of this world, and is that there's a order to things, and finding that order is important. And I think this is kind of where, in the next one, I want to talk about natural law, and this builds into that. But I'm going to leave it at that for now. Thanks for listening, guys. If you like what I'm saying and you want to join in on the conversation of our generation, please like and subscribe my videos, and we'll get the dialogue going. And if you see these things on Facebook and Twitter, and you feel like what I'm saying is important, or what I'm saying makes sense, or whatever, share it or comment or add questions, something that you think that I didn't cover, hit on it and help me out with that, But thanks for listening, and thanks for coming around and helping me build this. All right, have a good one.